$450,000 now. 30% of that is over $135,000. I know. I'm good at math. That's why I have money. And you two are always broke. He flinched. That's not, we're not broke. We just have a lot of expenses. David, your combined household income is $10,000 a month. Your mortgage payment alone is $3,200. Add in car payments, credit cards, utilities, groceries, and Sarah's shopping habit, and you're spending more than you make every single month. How do you know all that? Because I've been making up the difference for the past 3 years. Do you think the money fairy was leaving cash under your pillow? The hotel room phone rang. I answered it while David sat there processing his new reality. Mrs. Hayes, this is Megan from Broad Bay Country Club. I have the bride's mother on another line. She's asking about reinstating today's reception. She says she'll pay all the costs if you'll allow us to proceed. I looked at David, who was listening with desperate hope in his eyes. That's very generous of her, Megan, but I'm afraid that won't be possible. Mom, please, David started. I held up a hand to silence him. You see, Megan, there are some family dynamics at play here that make it inappropriate for me to accept payment from other family members for an event I chose to cancel. I understand. Should I tell Mrs. Lawson that the cancellation stands? Yes, please. And Megan, send my final bill to this hotel. I'll settle up everything I owe for the inconvenience. After hanging up, I turned back to David. Sarah's mother was willing to pay $20,000 to save your reception. She's been planning this wedding for months. She invited half her book club. How nice for her. Too bad her daughter couldn't manage to be civil to the person who was originally paying for everything. David pulled out his phone. I need to call Sarah. We need to figure out what to do about the house. Go ahead. But David, when you talk to your wife about our new arrangement, make sure she understands something. He looked up from dialing. I'm not the same woman who walked out of your house last night. That woman was desperate to keep peace in the family at any cost. This woman is done being taken advantage of. You're really going to force us to sell our home? I'm going to exercise my legal rights as a co-owner. What you do with that information is up to you. He left without another word, probably to deliver the worst news of Sarah's life on what was supposed to be the happiest day. 20 minutes later, my phone rang again. Eleanor. Sarah's voice was barely recognizable through her tears. We need to talk. No, sweetie. We really don't. You made it very clear yesterday that talking to me wasn't something you were interested in doing. I was upset. I was stressed about the wedding. I didn't mean what I said. Of course you were upset. It must be exhausting pretending to tolerate someone you obviously despise. I don't despise you, Eleanor. In the 3 years since you moved into the house I bought for you, you've never once thanked me. Not once. You've never asked about my life, my interests, my health. You've never invited me to anything unless you needed me to babysit or bring food or write a check. That's not true. When was the last time you called just to see how I was doing? Silence. I'll save you the mental effort. Never. You've never called just to check on me. But, you're David's mother. Your family. Yesterday, you told me the best gift I could give this family was to disappear permanently. Today you're claiming I'm family. Which is it, Sarah? More crying. The kind of desperate sobbing that once would have made me rush over with tissues and comfort. Eleanor, please. I'll do anything. I'll apologize publicly. I'll pay you back. Pay me back with what money? You don't work, remember. You're a full-time homemaker in a house you couldn't afford without my money. I'll get a job. That's a great idea. You should definitely do that. But it doesn't change the current situation with the house. What if we agree to pay you back for everything? All the money you've given us over the years. I almost laughed. Sarah, honey, you owe me $172,000. At minimum wage, it would take you about 8 years to earn that much. And that's assuming you never spend money on anything else. The silence that followed was the sound of reality finally sinking in. By 4 p.m., they'd called 22 more times. I'd answered exactly none of them. Instead, I was sitting in the hotel restaurant enjoying a lovely late lunch and watching local news coverage of a wedding disaster at Broad Bay Country Club. The reporter didn't mention names, but the footage of Sarah in her wedding dress crying on the club steps was pretty unmistakable. "Excuse me, aren't you Eleanor Hayes?" I looked up to see a woman about my age with perfectly styled silver hair and kind eyes. She looked familiar, but I couldn't place her. "I'm sorry. Do we know each other?" "Carol Lawson, Sarah's mother." She gestured to the empty chair across from me. "May I?" "This should be interesting." Carol sat down with the practiced grace of someone who'd spent decades handling social crises. "I wanted to thank you." That wasn't what I'd expected. "Thank me for showing my daughter who she really is." The waitress appeared, and Carol ordered coffee. "I've been worried about Sarah for years," Carol continued. "The entitlement, the way she treats people she considers beneath her, the complete lack of gratitude for anything. I kept hoping marriage would mature her. And now I've seen how she treats the woman who made her lifestyle possible. And I'm horrified." Carol's coffee arrived. She sipped it thoughtfully before continuing. "I offered to pay for the reception, not because I support Sarah's behavior, but because I felt responsible for the 150 guests who'd been inconvenienced. But you were right to refuse. Was I? My daughter needed to face consequences for her actions. Real consequences, the kind that can't be fixed with daddy's money or mommy's connections. I studied Carol carefully. There was something refreshing about her directness. She called me hysterical about the house situation. Carol continued, demanding that I loan them money to buy out your share. And I told her absolutely not. If she wanted to own a house, she should have treated the co-owner with respect. A woman after my own heart. Can I ask you something, Eleanor? What's your endgame here? Are you planning to force the sale? I'd been wondering that myself. Honestly, I haven't decided. Part of me wants to see if they can actually figure out how to support themselves without my money. Part of me wants to sell the house just to watch their perfect little world crumble. And the other part remembers that David is still my son, despite everything. Carol nodded. I understand. But may I offer some advice from someone who's been enabling her daughter's bad behavior for 39 years? Please. Don't save them from this. Whatever you decide about the house, don't cushion the fall. Sarah has never faced real consequences for treating people badly, and it's turned her into someone I barely recognize as my daughter. She reached into her purse and pulled out a business card. I'm flying back to Texas tomorrow. If you ever want to talk to someone who understands what it's like to love an ungrateful child, call me. After Carol left, I sat alone with my thoughts and my phone, which was still buzzing with increasingly desperate messages. The truth was, I hadn't decided what I wanted my endgame to be. I'd been reacting, protecting myself, asserting boundaries, but now I needed to figure out what came next. The nuclear option was forcing the sale. David and Sarah would have to find an apartment, probably in a much less desirable part of town. They'd finally understand what it meant to live within their means. The merciful option was offering to sell them my share for less than market value, maybe what I'd actually put into the house. They'd still struggle, but they might be able to keep their home. The spite option was holding on to my ownership stake indefinitely, collecting my share of the property taxes and any improvements while watching them squirm every month. As I sat there weighing my options, my phone rang again. This time, it wasn't David or Sarah. Mrs. Hayes, this is Detective Ramirez with the Seattle Police Department. I'm calling about a report we received regarding financial elder abuse. My blood went cold. I'm sorry. What? We had a call from someone claiming that family members have been financially exploiting you and that you might be experiencing cognitive decline. They're requesting a welfare check. Those manipulative little snakes. Detective Ramirez, I can assure you that I'm in full possession of my mental faculties. In fact, I'm probably thinking more clearly than I have in years. That's good to hear. But we do need to follow up on these reports. Would you be available to meet with me tomorrow morning? I looked around the hotel restaurant at the normal people living their normal lives and felt a surge of pure fury at my son and daughter-in-law's latest manipulation. Absolutely, detective. In fact, I have quite a lot I'd like to discuss with you about financial abuse, just not the kind my family reported. After scheduling the meeting, I sat back in my chair and smiled. If David and Sarah wanted to play hardball, I was more than ready to pick up the bat. Time to show them what a real power play looked like. Detective Ramirez was younger than I'd expected, maybe 35. With intelligent eyes and the kind of patient demeanor that probably served him well in family disputes. We met at the police station Monday morning, and I'd brought my entire financial file. Mrs. Hayes, I want to start by saying that the person who called us seemed genuinely concerned about your welfare. I'm sure they did. My daughter-in-law is very good at sounding concerned when it suits her purposes. I spread my bank statements across his desk. Detective, in the past 3 years, I've given my son and his wife $172,000. Would you like to see the documentation? His eyebrows rose as he examined the papers. Check after check, wire transfers, credit card payments made on their behalf, a pattern of financial dependency that looked exactly like what it was. This is substantial, he said carefully. It is. And yesterday, when I finally set some boundaries about how they treat me, they decided I must be mentally incompetent. I pulled out my phone and played the voicemail Sarah had left at 3 a.m. Eleanor, this is insane behavior. Normal people don't destroy their families' lives over hurt feelings. We're worried about you. Maybe you need to see someone. Get some help. David thinks you might be having some kind of breakdown. Detective Ramirez listened, taking notes. Has there been any history of cognitive issues, Mrs. Hayes? None whatsoever. I manage my own finances, maintain my own household, drive myself places. The only thing that's changed is that I stopped letting them take advantage of me. I showed him the house documents Lisa had sent over. My lawyer can verify that I'm a legal co-owner of their property. Everything I'm doing is within my rights as an investor protecting her assets. And the wedding cancellation, I was paying for a reception for people who told me to disappear from their family permanently. So I honored their request. We talked for another 20 minutes. Detective Ramirez was thorough but fair. And by the end, he seemed satisfied that I was mentally competent and financially savvy. Mrs. Hayes, I'm going to close this case as unfounded, but I do want to give you some information about elder financial abuse resources just in case. Actually, Detective, I think I've got the situation well in hand now. As I drove away from the police station, my phone rang. David again. Mom, the police called. They said they're not pursuing the welfare check. That's because I'm not the one being financially abused in this relationship, sweetheart. What's that supposed to mean? It means you and Sarah have been systematically draining my resources for years while giving me nothing but disrespect in return. The detective was very interested in my documentation. A long pause. Are you threatening us? I'm informing you that your manipulation tactics aren't working anymore. Mom, please. Can we just sit down and talk about this like adults? We can, but not at the house I co-own. And not until Sarah apologizes for her behavior. She's sorry. She's been crying for 2 days. Has she? Because the voicemail she left me at 3 this morning suggested she thinks I'm mentally ill. Not that she's sorry. Another pause. Where do you want to meet? Lisa Wong's office. Tomorrow at 2 p.m. Bring Sarah and bring a realistic proposal for how you're going to handle the house situation. A proposal. David, I own 30% of an asset worth $450,000. That's my retirement security. You either buy me out or we sell. Those are your options. After hanging up, I realized something had shifted in our dynamic. For the first time in years, they needed something from me more than I needed something from them. Lisa's law office felt like neutral territory, all sleek lines and modern art. David and Sarah arrived 15 minutes late, looking like they'd been arguing in the car. Sarah's eyes were puffy and red, her usual polish completely gone. She'd clearly been crying for days, and part of me felt a twinge of sympathy. The other part remembered her words, the best gift would be if you disappeared from our family. Eleanor Sarah started immediately. I owe you an enormous apology. I was stressed and overwhelmed, and I said things I didn't mean. Thank you. That's a start. She looked surprised, like she'd expected me to immediately forgive everything. Lisa spread the house documents across the conference table. Let's review the facts. Eleanor provided $120,000 for the down payment. The mortgage shows her as a co-borrower. The deed lists her ownership at 30%. David studied the papers like they might magically change. We had no idea about the ownership stake. You would have if Sarah had signed the acknowledgement forms, Lisa replied crisply. I sent them 3 times. I was busy with wedding planning, Sarah said weakly. For 3 years. Lisa's tone was beautifully skeptical. I let them squirm for a moment before speaking. The question now is how we move forward. I have a proposal. They both leaned forward hopefully. Option 1. You buy out my 30% share at current market value, $135,000. Sarah's face went white. We don't have that kind of money. Option 2. we put the house on the market and split the proceeds according to ownership percentages. We'd have to move, David said quietly. Yes, you would. To something you can actually afford. What about option 3? Sarah asked desperately. There is no option 3. Those are your choices. Lisa pulled out a calculator. If you sold the house today after realtor fees and closing costs, you'd probably net around $410,000. Eleanor's share would be about $123,000. You'd have $287,000 to find new housing. That's not enough for anything decent, Sarah protested. It's enough for a nice condo or a smaller house in a different neighborhood, I replied. You know, the kind of place people with your actual income should be living. David ran his hands through his hair. Mom, is there any way we can work out a payment plan? Maybe we could pay you monthly until we've bought out your share. I'd been waiting for this. At what interest rate, and with what collateral? You've already proven you don't honor financial agreements. That's not fair. Isn't it? You owe me $52,000 in emergency loans that you never intended to repay. Why would I trust you with another $135,000? Sarah started crying again. This is going to destroy our lives. No, Sarah. This is going to force you to live within your means for the first time in your adult life. But what about our credit? What about our reputation? I almost laughed. Your credit. Honey, your credit is already terrible. You've been late on every bill for months. I know because I've been bailing you out. Lisa cleared her throat. I need to advise you that Eleanor has every legal right to force a sale. She's being more than generous by offering these options. How long do we have to decide? David asked. 30 days, I said. That should give you time to explore your financing options. As we prepared to leave, Sarah grabbed my arm. Eleanor, please. I know I hurt you, but we're family. Doesn't that count for something? I looked at her hand on my arm, then at her face. For just a moment, I saw the scared young woman behind the entitled facade. Sarah, family is supposed to count for something. That's exactly the point. 2 weeks into their 30-day deadline, I got an unexpected visitor. Carol Lawson stood on my hotel room doorstep with a bottle of wine and a determined expression. I hope you don't mind me dropping by. I got your hotel information from Lisa Wong. I invited her in, curious about what had brought Sarah's mother back from Texas. I came to check on the kids, Carol said, settling into the room's only armchair. And to talk to you. How are they doing? Terribly. Sarah's having daily panic attacks. David's working overtime, trying to find a way to get a loan. They're fighting constantly. I poured us both glasses of wine, surprised to find I felt less satisfaction in their misery than I'd expected. "Carol, are you here to ask me to reconsider?" "Actually, no. I'm here to tell you about Sarah's father." That wasn't what I'd expected. "Mark spoiled our daughter rotten," Carol continued. "Every tantrum was rewarded. Every consequence was cushioned. Every failure was someone else's fault." She sipped her wine thoughtfully. "When Sarah was 18, she wrecked her new car texting and driving. Instead of letting her face the insurance hike and the repair costs, Mark bought her a newer model and paid to fix everything." "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I've watched my daughter become someone I don't recognize, and I finally understand that her problems aren't going to be solved by more money or more rescuing." Carol reached into her purse and pulled out a check. "Sarah asked me to give you this. It's for $40,000, a good faith payment toward buying out your share." I looked at the check but didn't touch it. "And what did you tell her?" "I told her I wouldn't be her enabler anymore. That check represents Mark's retirement bonus. Money I was saving for her inheritance. But I realized that giving it to her would just be repeating the same pattern." She tore the check in half. "Carol, that's a lot of money. Money Sarah hasn't earned and doesn't deserve. Eleanor, I want you to know that whatever you decide about the house, you have my support. Even if it means they lose their home. Especially then, maybe having to start over will teach Sarah what work and gratitude actually mean." After Carol left, I sat alone with my thoughts. For 3 years, I'd been Sarah's enabler just as much as her parents had been. Every time I wrote a check to cover their shortfall, I'd been teaching them that there would always be someone to catch them when they fell. The question was, what kind of lesson did I want them to learn now? My phone buzzed with a text from David. "Mom, we've been approved for a home equity loan that would cover $80,000 toward buying you out. Can we meet to discuss partial payment arrangements for the rest?" I stared at the message for a long time. They were trying, which was more than they'd done in years, but a home equity loan meant going deeper into debt, not learning to live responsibly. I typed back, "We can discuss it, but I want to see a complete household budget and a realistic plan for paying off all your debts, not just mine." His response came immediately, "Anything you want, Mom. We just want to make this right." For the first time since this whole thing started, that sounded like progress. The budget meeting was enlightening in the worst possible way. David and Sarah spread their financial documents across Lisa's conference table like evidence of a crime, which, in a way, they were. "Okay," I said, reviewing their monthly expenses. "You spend $500 a month on restaurants." "We both work long hours," Sarah said defensively. "Sometimes we're too tired to cook." "You don't work at all, Sarah." "I mean, David works long hours." I moved down the list. $400 a month on Sarah's clothing budget. I need to look professional for social events. What social events? You don't have a job. Sarah's face was getting red, but I continued. $250 on premium streaming services and cable. $180 on Sarah's spa membership that you use maybe twice a month. $1,200 a month in credit card minimums for what appears to be shopping and vacation debt. David was adding numbers on his phone calculator. Mom, I know it looks bad. It looks like you're living a lifestyle that requires about $14,000 a month when you bring home $10,000. But with the home equity loan, we could pay off the credit cards and reduce our monthly expenses significantly, Sarah said hopefully. Sarah, you'd be borrowing against the house to pay off credit card debt. What happens when you run up the credit cards again? We won't. We've learned our lesson. Have you? Because I don't see any significant changes in this budget. You're still eating out constantly, still maintaining expensive memberships you barely use, still treating shopping like a hobby. David leaned forward. What would you want to see, Mom? What would convince you that we're serious about changing? Finally, the right question. I want to see a budget that reflects your actual income. I want to see you cooking at home, canceling unnecessary subscriptions, and Sarah getting a job. A job? Sarah looked horrified. Yes, a job. You're 38 years old with a college degree. There's no reason you can't contribute to the household income. But David makes good money. Not good enough, apparently, since you've been supplementing it with my money for 3 years. Lisa cleared her throat. Eleanor, what exactly are you proposing? I'd been thinking about this for days. Here's my offer. You can buy out my share for $100,000 instead of the full market value of $135,000, but there are conditions. They both perked up. First, Sarah gets a job within 60 days and maintains it for at least 2 years. Second, you sell one of your cars and use the proceeds to pay down debt. Third, you stick to a realistic budget with no restaurant meals, no unnecessary shopping, and no new debt for 2 years. How would you monitor that? David asked. Monthly financial check-ins with Lisa. You provide bank statements, credit reports, and proof of income. If you violate any of the conditions, the full amount becomes due immediately. Sarah was shaking her head. That's like being in financial prison. No, Sarah. That's called being accountable for your choices. They asked for time to discuss it privately. While they huddled in the hallway, Lisa turned to me. This is either very generous or very cruel. I can't decide which. Maybe it's both. When they came back, David spoke for both of them. We accept your terms. All of them. All of them. Sarah confirmed, though she looked like she was swallowing poison. Lisa started drafting the agreement. I'll need this notarized and filed with the county recorder's office. As we finalized the paperwork, I watched my son and daughter-in-law sign away their financial freedom for the next 2 years. Part of me felt victorious. Part of me felt sad that it had come to this. But mostly, I felt like I was finally teaching them a lesson their parents should have taught them decades ago. Actions have consequences, and family isn't a free pass to treat people badly. 6 months later, I was sitting in my new apartment, a lovely one-bedroom in a senior community with walking trails and a community center, when Sarah called with surprising news. Eleanor, I got the promotion. Sarah had started working as an administrative assistant at a tech company, and apparently she'd been good enough at it to move up to office coordinator. That's wonderful, honey. How do you feel? Exhausted, she laughed. And it was the first genuine laugh I'd heard from her in years. But also proud. I never knew I could be good at something like this. You always were organized. You just never had to use those skills before. There was a pause. Eleanor, I owe you an apology. A real one, not the panicked one from Lisa's office. I'm listening. I was horrible to you for years. I treated you like an ATM and then got angry when you had feelings about it. I told myself you were just being dramatic, but the truth is I was entitled and cruel. I set down my coffee cup, surprised by how much her words affected me. What changed your mind? Having to work for money instead of just asking for it. Realizing how hard it is to save even $200 when you're paying your own bills. Understanding what you sacrificed to help us. And David. He's getting there. He still thinks you were too harsh, but he admits we needed to change. Through my window, I could see other residents working in the community garden. I'd signed up to help with the spring planting next week. How are things between you two? Better, actually. We're talking more now that we're not constantly stressed about money. We cook together. We take walks instead of going shopping. It's nice. I'm glad. Eleanor, would you like to come to dinner sometime? Nothing fancy. Just homemade lasagna and maybe some conversation that isn't about money. I thought about it. The old Eleanor would have said yes immediately, desperate to restore the relationship. The new Eleanor had learned to protect her boundaries. I'd like that, but let's start with lunch in a public place. Baby steps. Of course. Whatever you're comfortable with. After we hung up, I sat quietly for a while, processing how different this conversation had felt from all the others. Sarah had sounded like an adult, taking responsibility for her actions, not a child making excuses. Maybe the lesson had finally taken. My phone buzzed with a text from Carol Lawson. Heard about Sarah's promotion. Thank you for not giving up on her. I texted back, thank you for not bailing her out. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do for someone is let them face the consequences of their choices. Sometimes love means saying no. And sometimes the best gift you can give someone is the opportunity to discover who they really are when no one's there to catch them. I'd spent 3 years being their safety net. And in doing so, I'd robbed them of the chance to develop their own strength. When I finally pulled that net away, they'd learned to fly. Not because they wanted to, but because they had to. And maybe that was the most valuable lesson of all. Outside my window, the sun was setting over the walking trail where I'd signed up for a seniors book club. Tomorrow, I was having coffee with a man named Richard, who'd asked me out after we'd both laughed at the same joke during last week's community event. At 70, I was finally learning what it felt like to be valued for who I was, not what I could provide. And that was worth more than all the money I'd ever given away. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe and feel free to share your story in the comments. Your voice matters. Let's do it, okay?